She's the mother of my child. I heard the words before I realized they were meant for me. The room, the enormous, gold-draped ballroom filled with cherry blossoms and strings of pearls, stood in stunned silence. I had collapsed just minutes earlier, right in the middle of the CEO's wedding aisle, not from illness, but from the weight of holding everything in. My vision blurred, but I saw the flash of his tailored, white tuxedo as he rushed forward. Kai Tanaka, the groom. The man whose name I had stopped whispering in my dreams years ago. The man everyone believed belonged to another. My pulse pounded in my ears as murmurs broke through the silence. People recognizing me, judging me. Isn't she from his company? Why is she here? Did she just faint at his wedding? But his voice cut through them all. Raw, shaking, real. She's the mother of my child. The sound of champagne glasses slipping from guests' hands echoed like gunshots. I tried to sit up, my dress sticking to the marble, my heart refusing to slow down. His fiancée's bouquet fell to the floor with a soft thud, petals scattering like forgotten memories. No one moved. No one dared. All eyes were on me, on the girl they thought was just another assistant, just another employee who had stumbled into a day that wasn't hers. But it was mine, in a way no one else could ever understand. And in that moment, when Kai's voice cracked in front of hundreds, everything we buried clawed its way into the light. 1 week earlier, the email came at 11:47 p.m., just as I was about to shut my laptop. Final wedding coordination assigned to Mei Lin. My name, bold and cold, right beneath the subject line. I stared at it for a full minute, my hands frozen above the keyboard. It was an internal assignment from HR, an honor, they said. Kai Tanaka's wedding was the talk of the city, splashed across luxury magazines and whispered about in every break room. I had done everything to avoid it, and yet there it was, my name tied to his day. At first, I considered refusing, but the truth was I needed the work. My mother's hospital bills were piling up, and part of me, some small, defiant part, wanted to see how he looked now, whether time had changed him, or whether I had simply faded in his memory like a ghost. I told myself I would be invisible, just a planner, hidden behind spreadsheets and schedules. When I arrived at the wedding venue for the first time, a secluded glass chapel surrounded by water and lantern-lit trees, I wore black slacks and no makeup. I didn't want to be seen. But the past has a cruel sense of timing. In the rehearsal hall, his voice rang out as he joked with his in-laws. And when I turned the corner and saw him for the first time in 6 years, I felt everything in my body tighten. He didn't notice me. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But later, when I caught him staring during the wine tasting, I knew. I had never really left him. I wasn't supposed to be there when he walked in. I wasn't even supposed to look up. But fate has a way of twisting the quiet into storms. I had gone to the storage room to find a missing invoice, something minor. I wasn't in the rehearsal schedule. I wasn't meant to cross paths with him, not like that. But the moment I stepped out with the paper in hand, I heard his laughter. Low, familiar, effortless. My heart stuttered. Kai walked into the room flanked by his fiancée and her family, all dressed in pristine designer formals for the pre-wedding portrait session. I froze, my body instinctively pulling behind the curtain divider. But it was too late. He saw me, and it wasn't a passing glance. His smile dropped. His eyes stayed. He looked at me like the air had shifted. For a second, no one else existed in that room. I turned quickly, pretending to search my phone, hoping he'd forget. But later that evening, I noticed a change. Every meeting I attended, he was there. Every time I tried to fade into background, I'd feel his gaze. It wasn't love, I wasn't naive, but it was recognition. And recognition is dangerous, especially when you've kept something hidden. My son, our son, the boy who looked more like him every day. I had buried that truth so deep, I started to believe it belonged in another life. But now, Watching Kai's tension rise in each interaction, I feared the truth had found its own way out, like it was waiting for the perfect moment to crack the silence and destroy everything he thought he built. 2 days before the wedding, the schedule was airtight, down to the minute: ceremony rehearsal, final catering approval, a seating chart that had changed 16 times. I moved like a ghost through the venue, clipboard in hand, earpiece buzzing with constant updates. No one looked at me twice, and I preferred it that way. But then Mrs. Kim, the groom's future mother-in-law, cornered me near the floral arch. "You're the planner, right?" Her eyes scanned me, lingering on my plain heels and tied-back hair. I nodded. She leaned in. "Keep your distance from Kai. My daughter gets nervous around people like you." People like me. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Of course, ma'am." She walked away before I could say another word, heels clicking against the polished stone floor like an exclamation point. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just added "final seating check" to my to-do list and turned away. But I felt it, the familiar burn of being reminded that I didn't belong. Not in this world of silk gowns and legacy marriages. Not in the space beside Kai Tanaka. What Mrs. Kim didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my distance wasn't a threat. It was survival. I had spent 6 years building my life around the absence of a man who didn't even know he had a son. And now, 2 days before he said "I do" to someone else, I was being warned not to stand too close, as if proximity alone could betray the truth. As if the truth wasn't already clawing its way to the surface, one sideways glance at a child's photo on my lock screen at a time. That night, I went home to silence. My apartment was small, just 2 rooms above a dumpling shop, but it was ours. Mine and Haru's. He was already asleep when I got in, his tiny socks kicked off at the end of the bed, one arm curled around his stuffed fox. I knelt beside him, brushing his hair from his forehead. He looked so much like Kai had hurt. Same jawline, same lashes, same little crease between his brows when he dreamed. For years, I convinced myself that hiding Haru was the right thing. Kai had made his choice, a career, a future arranged by boardrooms and old family names. He'd left before I could tell him, or maybe I had just been too scared to. But now, being near him again, feeling his gaze follow me like a question he hadn't dared ask, it cracked something open. I didn't want Haru to grow up wondering why he didn't know his father. But I also didn't want him to be a secret dropped into a storm of politics and social contracts. I sat on the floor for a long time that night, watching my son breathe. Outside, the city buzzed with wedding prep. Fireworks testing near the Han River. Floral deliveries running late. The whole world spinning toward a day I wasn't supposed to be part of. But fate has a strange way of looping back. And as I reached for my phone to silence an incoming message from the venue, Haru murmured in his sleep, "Mommy, will I ever meet Daddy?" My heart cracked in half. I didn't know how to answer. The morning before the wedding, I arrived early, too early. The venue was still quiet, the garden misted from the night rain. White chairs lined in perfect rows under a canopy of silk lanterns. I stood alone in the center aisle, clipboard pressed to my chest like a shield. The pressure in my ribs was unbearable. The florist hadn't arrived. The pastry chef was behind schedule. And somewhere inside, Kai was getting ready to marry a woman. He didn't even look at the way he once looked at me. I kept telling myself it was just a job, just logistics, just another day on the calendar. But when I walked past the private lounge, I heard his voice, low, firm, more tired than I remembered. He was talking to his best man, something about legacy and duty and not having time for mistakes. I paused, fingers trembling over the handle of the door, and then I walked away. What was I expecting? A miracle? That he'd see me and remember? That he'd stop everything and ask where I had gone? That kind of closure doesn't exist in real life. In real life, people smile through pain, walk past their pasts, and say vows they were told to recite. I took a deep breath and forced myself into the main hall. But just before the final walkthrough began, a junior planner handed me a note. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper in Kai's handwriting. 5 words. I saw your son's photo. My hands went cold. My throat tightened. The paper nearly slipped from my fingers. So he knew, and now there was no going back. I didn't respond to the note. I couldn't. For the next few hours, I buried myself in checklists, counting table settings, coordinating lighting cues, double-checking the string quartet's placement. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach flipped. But it was never him. Still, I felt his presence everywhere. Every corner I turned, it was like he had just walked past. I caught glimpses of him during the family photos, standing tall and composed next to his bride, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I told myself that was guilt, or maybe imagination. Either way, it didn't matter. My job was to disappear before the ceremony began. I had arranged for the team to take over once the guests were seated. I wasn't meant to be seen, but fate again had other plans. As I stepped out of the staff room to leave, I saw Haru's photo, my phone screen, glowing on the check-in table where I had left it by accident. And there he was, Kai, holding the phone, staring at it like the world had dropped out from under him. His fiancée was across the room, laughing with the bridesmaids. He looked up at me, eyes burning, as if the universe had handed him a puzzle he didn't know he'd been solving. I didn't move. Neither did he. Then, slowly, he walked toward me. "Is he mine?" he whispered. My voice barely came out. Yes. In that moment, I saw something shift in his face, not anger, not shock, just devastation, as if everything he had built was now sitting on a foundation of questions, and I had just lit the match. We didn't speak again after that. He stood there for a second longer, staring at the photo like it would explain everything. Then he handed me the phone and walked away, back to his dressing room, back to the ceremony, back to the life he had chosen. I returned to the staff area, my legs barely holding me up. The others were busy adjusting seating cards and fixing a tear in the flower wall. No one noticed the storm inside me. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab Haru from the neighbors and vanish across the city. But I had stayed hidden for so long, I didn't know how to leave anymore. Instead, I sat on a folding chair behind the supply shelves and cried for the first time in months. Not because of Kai, not even because of the wedding. I cried because Haru deserved more. More than a father who didn't know him. More than a mother too afraid to break the silence. When I finally stood up, mascara smeared and eyes swollen, the ceremony was 10 minutes away. The chapel buzzed with guests. Music floated in the air like a promise. I told the junior planner I'd step in for the final run-through and then leave before the vows. Just one last check, one last look, and then I'd vanish the way I was always meant to. But as I adjusted the mic volume and fixed the flower girl's sash, I felt the ground sway beneath me. My head spun. My knees buckled. I remember the sound of my clipboard hitting the floor, and then darkness, heavy and fast, like the moment had swallowed me whole. When I came to, everything was chaos. Someone had loosened my dress collar. Another had propped my head with a rolled-up table runner. The scent of peonies and perfume clung to the air like fog. A woman, maybe a bridesmaid, was fanning me with a program, her eyes wide with concern. But none of that mattered, because as I blinked back into the world, I heard him. Kai, not in whispers or confusion, but in a voice that cracked through the chapel like thunder. "She's the mother of my child." The words exploded into the silence, louder than any music, sharper than any violin. The room fell still. Hundreds of guests, perfectly dressed in satin and suits, turned toward the sound. Toward me. My hands trembled as I tried to sit up, legs still weak beneath me. I could see his fiancée on the altar, frozen mid-step, bouquet slipping from her fingers. I could see the priest speechless, mouth slightly open. But all I could hear was the pounding in my chest. He had said it, out loud, in front of everyone. I expected whispers, outrage, judgment. What I didn't expect was silence. Raw, heavy silence. No one moved. No one even breathed. As if the truth had paralyzed the moment. Kai stepped forward, eyes locked on mine, his expression unreadable. Somewhere between panic and clarity. I wanted to speak, to explain, but the words caught in my throat. He knelt beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice low, broken. And all I could do was stare back, because in that moment, I honestly didn't know the answer anymore. The chapel emptied slower than I expected, not in anger or frenzy, but in confusion. Guests whispered behind their hands, casting glances over their shoulders as they walked past. Some looked at me with pity, others with quiet judgment. I sat on a bench near the back, clutching a bottle of water someone had handed me, while Kai disappeared with his parents and fiancé into one of the private suites. The wedding had been paused indefinitely. Not cancelled, not yet, but frozen. The music had stopped, the officiant left, and the bridal party stood around unsure of what to do with their perfectly timed grief. I watched them like I was behind glass. Still, silent, a figure no longer invisible but now unwanted. Eventually, one of the bridesmaids approached. Her name was Hannah. I remembered because she had been the kindest one during rehearsals. She sat beside me without speaking for a moment, then placed something in my hand. It was the bouquet, white lilies and small blue irises. "He never told her about you," she said quietly, "or your son." I looked at her, unsure what she wanted from me. Sympathy? Explanation? An apology? She shook her head. She was never the right person for him. Everyone knows. She just came from the right family. Her voice cracked a little. "But he looked at you like he used to breathe around you." I blinked, unsure whether to cry or run. Then she stood up, smoothing her dress, and added, "They're talking about postponing everything, maybe even calling it off." I didn't respond. I couldn't, because for the first time in years, the future wasn't something I feared. It was something terrifyingly open. I stepped outside for air. The sky had shifted, clouds rolling in with the weight of a storm, though no rain had fallen yet. The garden, which hours ago had been pristine and photo-ready, now looked like the aftermath of a forgotten celebration. Petals littered the stone path. A glass flute lay sideways on a bench, and in the distance I saw Kai, alone near the koi pond. He stood perfectly still, hands in his pockets, back turned to the chapel. For a long time I didn't move. Then, as if sensing me, he turned. His eyes were different now. No longer sharp and unreadable, just tired and human. I walked toward him slowly, every step echoing with memories. The late nights in Tokyo, the unspoken goodbye, the first kick I felt when he wasn't there. I stopped a few feet from him. "You were never supposed to find out like that," I said, voice soft but steady. He didn't speak right away, just looked down at the water, watching the koi ripple past fallen flower petals. "I thought I was doing what was right," he said. "For everyone. The company. My family. Her." He glanced at me, but I forgot to ask myself what I wanted. The wind picked up, rustling the trees above us. "Do you want to meet him?" I asked. That was the first time his face cracked. Truly cracked. Not with shock or pride, but something deeper. Regret. Wonder. Grief. "Yes," he whispered. "But only if you let me." And for the first time in years, I felt control slip through my fingers. And I didn't fight it. We sat on the stone bench by the pond for almost an hour, saying almost nothing. The storm didn't come. The clouds hovered, but held back, like the day itself was waiting for our permission to move forward. I told him about Haru, about his love for building things, how he counts every step when he climbs stairs, how he hums when he draws. I didn't mention the nights he asked why he didn't have a daddy like the other kids. I didn't need to. Kai heard it in my voice. He asked if Haru had his laugh. I said yes. And then, without warning, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small ring box. It wasn't the engagement ring. It was older, faded leather. "I bought this for you 6 years ago," he said. I was going to propose after the summer ended, but his voice trailed off. I looked at the ring, a simple gold band with an engraving inside. "To tomorrow." My breath caught. "I didn't leave because I didn't care," he said quietly. "I left because I was told I didn't have the right to choose you." For so long, I had imagined this moment, played out 1,000 versions of what I would say, how I would hurt him back, how I would make him regret leaving. But sitting beside him, broken by the same decisions that had broken me, I realized there was no revenge, just pieces, and the hope that maybe, somehow, we could still build something new. Not a perfect ending, but a beginning no one planned. The next morning, I didn't go into the office. I didn't check emails, didn't respond to the event team group chat, which had exploded overnight with speculation and apologies. I stayed home with Haru. We made pancakes, burned the first two, and he insisted we eat on the floor of the living room like it was a picnic. He talked about school and his favorite dinosaur and the drawing he was saving for someone special. I watched him, memorizing every detail. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was hiding. Around 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Kai standing there, no suit, no polished shoes, just jeans, a hoodie, and a small bag in one hand. His eyes met mine, nervous, open. "Is he here?" I nodded. Haru peeked from behind the couch. Curious, I knelt down beside him. "Haru, remember when you asked about your daddy?" He nodded slowly. I took his hand. "He's here, and he'd really like to meet you." Haru looked up at me, then at Kai. He didn't say anything at first, just walked toward him. Small steps, unsure. Kai crouched, holding out the toy fox he had somehow remembered from the photo. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm your dad." Haru stared for a moment, then took the toy, his tiny fingers wrapping around it. "You look like me," he whispered. Kai laughed through a tear, and in that quiet, unplanned moment, everything shifted. There was no audience, no altar, just 3 people in a doorway, trying to rewrite the ending we were never given the chance to begin. We spent the rest of the morning in the park near our apartment, a quiet stretch of green tucked between buildings, where the sounds of the city softened just enough to feel like peace. Haru clung to Kai at first, unsure whether to play or observe, but eventually the questions came. "Do you know how to do monkey bars? Do you eat spicy ramen? Why didn't you come before?" Kai answered everything gently, never looking at me for help, never dodging the hard parts. "I didn't know about you," he told Haru, "but now that I do, I want to be here. Every day if I can." And somehow that was enough. Haru nodded, as if weighing the answer, then handed Kai a dandelion from the grass. "You can stay if you like dogs," he said seriously, "because I'm getting one." Kai smiled. "Then I guess I better like dogs." Watching them made my heart ache in the most unfamiliar way. It wasn't pain, it was possibility. A life that had been just out of reach for so long, now within arm's length. We didn't talk about the wedding. Not the canceled ceremony. Not the furious in-laws or the whispers across the company. For a moment, we existed outside of consequence, just a mother, a father, and a boy who believed people could come back when they meant it. And maybe they could. Maybe we all could. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops and Haru pulled us both into a clumsy group hug, I realized something simple and terrifying. I didn't know where we'd go from here. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. That night, after Haru had fallen asleep curled between us on the couch, I stood by the window, staring out at the city lights, flickering like quiet confessions. Kai joined me a few minutes later, his hand brushing mine before he gently took it. We stood in silence for a while, no need for explanations. "They're angry," he finally said. "Her family, mine, the board. They think I've destroyed everything." I turned to him. "Did you?" His gaze held mine. "No," he whispered. "I think I just finally told the truth." I nodded because I understood. For years, we had both lived in versions of ourselves that made other people comfortable. Roles assigned without consent. Stories edited to fit someone else's ending. But here, in the quiet hum of a modest apartment far from expectations, we were real, unfiltered, bruised but breathing. "Do you think we can make this work?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "I want to try. I don't know how, but I want to try with both of you." And somehow, that was all I needed to hear. No grand promises. No ring. Just a choice. A real one. I leaned my head against his shoulder as Haru stirred in his sleep. Tomorrow would come with questions, with consequences. But tonight we had this. The beginning. Or maybe not a beginning, but a return to something honest. As the city settled into sleep and a light breeze brushed against the glass, I whispered what I had been afraid to say for years. "I never stopped loving you." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His hand tightened around mine, and we stood there, unafraid of what came next.